Good afternoon and welcome to the Board of Commissioners meeting for the Albany Housing Authority. Today is July 8th, 2025. Welcome everybody. Glad everyone's staying cool. We do have someone registered to speak in our community forum today. Is Ms. Robinson present? Ms. Robinson is not present. We will move to our action items.
Before, Chairman, if you don't mind, if I can have a moment.
You may have a moment.
Okay. With sadness, I announce that our dear friend and board member, Rosetta Scott, or I would say Reverend Rosetta Scott Foster, passed away last week. So I would like us to take a moment of silence on her, in her honor, please. Thank you.
Thank you. That's sad news. She was a wonderful colleague and a great representative.
I saw it on Facebook, so the service is July 20th.
Yes, I will send everyone. Yes, I'll send everyone the information.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
That's sad news. We will move to our action items. Motion to our meeting minutes from our June 10th, 2025.
I'll make that motion.
Can I get a second?
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are happily joined once again via whatever this is, the WebEx, by Mike Maurice of Polari and Company to review our annual audit. Sir, if you'd like to jump right in.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I will,
Good afternoon.
so I'll bring everyone's attention to page 11, sorry, page 12 in the report. And I think I'll just go over this briefly, but I think most of you are now familiar that the audit contains 3 reports that we issued. The first is the independent auditor's report, which gives an opinion on the financial statements taken as a whole, all the authority's programs. The report this year is unqualified. That's the best opinion that you can get. That means that there were no adjustments that the authority and we disagreed on that needed to be recorded that weren't. So you got an unqualified opinion, which is again, like I said, the best opinion that you could get. The other 2 reports, which can be found towards the back of the report, starting on page 82, are the Yellow Book report and the single audit reports. Now, the single audit report is our report on the authority's compliance with the compliance requirements for the major programs. For this year, the major programs were the Public Housing Operating Fund and the Public Housing Capital Fund. And there were no findings, if you will, on the compliance with the laws and the rules and regulations of those 2 programs. I will bring to the board's attention, and we didn't raise it to the level of a finding, but I wanted to discuss with you, and I discussed it thoroughly with Brandon and I believe the authority's counsel, is when it comes to emergency repairs, it is of our opinion that emergency repairs, whether it happens after the repair work is done, but at some point, it needs to be brought to the board to explain to the board that what the emergency was, why it was an emergency, who was procured, the amount, and there should be a resolution stating that it was an emergency. And an emergency, in our opinion, would be something such as the boiler breaks in February and that the tenants have no heat. That's clearly an emergency. People have to have heat. That's something that you can't go out for bid on. If you're dealing with a vendor and you feel you're getting a fair price from him, that you would hire him and then bring that to the board, and then there would be a resolution that was an emergency repair that needed to be done paid for with either capital funds or operating funds. Does anyone have any comments or question on that?
You have a question here?
Yeah, the only,
Well, Mark first, then we'll get you next.
yeah, he'll probably
He
say
had
what
his
I was
hand up
gonna say.
first.
Okay.
But this is something that normally happens anyway, right? You guys bring stuff to the board.
When we know that we're going to spend it, but there has been, and this has happened over the years, when we have an emergency, we treat it as such and do it, but we don't always come back to the board and say, we need this retroactive resolution. So he's suggesting that we start to bring it to the board, even though we've already done the work.
And
But a lot of times it's under advisement, because a lot of times it's something that's significant, whereas it could hit the community. So we, try to make you aware of certain issues. But it's not a matter of the dollar amount that we necessarily share at that time of the emergency.
It would seem to me that and Mike, I asked this question of you, if it were below a certain threshold, say $5,000.
Oh, no, yeah,
we
Mike.
need to-
No, we're talking about if it goes over New York State bidding threshold. HUD's threshold is $100,000, but New York's is significantly lower. I believe it's, I think it's around 25,000 or $50,000. So
35 for.
35?
20%.
So
Okay.
it would be in the
All right,
case of
just
that,
wanted
Mike,
clarification.
if it exceeded $35,000, something for $5,000 certainly is not gonna, I'm certainly not gonna make an
You
issue
guys
out of
have-
that.
Constantly have emergencies.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying.
because we live in a world where emergencies happen almost every day.
Every day.
Indeed.
So anything under
No, we understand that.
20,
We're just trying to make
Okay.
sure
So
that
he's
that the
suggesting anything over moving.
board is aware of it.
We know
is
all of it.
okay, yes.
Yeah, we just
Thank you.
want to have it memorialized in the board minutes that there's a resolution that it was an emergency. That's all we're saying. We're not questioning that the work needed to be done.
Can it just be an update? Does it need to be a resolution?
No, so we talked I don't know if we talked about it with the board last time. So this popped up last year. People were confusing the requirement to come to the board to get contract approved with an emergency when it comes to the procurement process. So an emergency really only says you don't have to go through the normal procurement process, go out to bid and all the other stuff that we typically do. And I'm hoping that because I tried to address that with the people that I identified were perhaps causing some of these issues. So really what we need to do here is we should be coming back whenever we get to the point where our policy says that the board should be approving the agreement, even if we've already done the work. So procurement is separately, how we're procuring it is separate from what should be going in front of the board in order to get final approval for Chiquita to sign a contract.
Now, we do have these particular statements, if you will, as part of our bylaws. So we're already covered along those lines. Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Continue.
so both of the yellow book report and the single audit compliance report were, there were no findings. They were both unqualified for those two reports as well. So then I will backtrack a little bit and bring you back to page, if you will, page 17, which would be the statement of revenues and changes in that position. And basically, when we get to this page, this is going to show the results of operations of the authority. So if you look at towards the middle of the page, it says excess of operating expenses over revenues. And you see that the number, although it's a negative number, if you adjust that for the depreciation, which is about 3 lines above, you'll see that the results of the operation produced about $900,000 in excess revenues over expenses. So in terms of the operations, the authority is operating within its means of the revenues it's taking in each year. It didn't have to dip into reserves to cover operating expenditures during the year. So in that respect, the housing authority is healthy in that standpoint. And then if you just go back a couple of page 15, you can take a look at the balance sheet of the authority. You can see that we have it broken out between the housing authority column and the discretely presented component units. The component units, if everyone knows, is the tax credit properties. And there is schedules in the back of the audit report that breaks out that column by individual audit, by the different audits that were done. I believe there's 12 or 13 additional audits that we do, and those financial statements are broken out on page, starting on page 79. You can see the results of the and those are the excerpts exactly as they appeared in the individual audit reports from the balance sheet and the income statement and statement of cash flows. And then finally, again, if anybody has any questions, on page 74 is the financial data schedule. And the financial data schedule breaks up everything you see in the Albany housing column on the most left-hand side on the balance sheet and income statement. Those are all the programs that the authority is running at this time. I'm sure everyone's familiar with them, but there are a number of programs that Chiquita and her staff are running.
And Mike, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So because we have different funding sources, right? Do they
Yes.
all, when you said you did the separate audit, do they all have different formulas that you have to go through to match up?
I didn't hear the last part of the question.
So because we have different funding sources, right, for different properties, you mentioned you have to do multiple audits, right? Is that what 79 is? Is there like an overview of all the different audits, or is it all separate audits?
So
Is that what I'm asking?
So let me just break down your question a little bit. The first, when I refer to the column on the balance sheet that says discretely presented component units, those those columns in many cases don't get federal fundings. There are a couple of the tax credits that have ACC units where we pass federal dollars onto them. So they come into the housing authority and then we cut the check and give it to the tax credit property. Those are not government audits on the tax credits. If now you're referring to the FDS on page 74, yes, we look at, if you look at the FDS on 74, and you see that the housing authority has somewhere in the neighborhood of about $30 million in federal awards, about $35 million in federal awards. What we're required to do, because you're a low-risk housing authority, is test 20% of those. So we selected, and it's on a rotating basis for any program that's above $750,000. We test those for compliance. That's why it's called a single audit. We do it all at one time. So we chose, well, we didn't choose the work paper determined that we had to select low rent and capital fund this year. Most likely next year will be the voucher program. Maybe shelter plus care if it rises to that level. But that's the way those programs are chosen. They're chosen. There is a single audit planning document that we go through to determine which programs have to be tested on a rotated basis, ensuring we test 20% of the federal awards expended in the current year. And that's just for the housing authority. On the tax credits, your funding is basically ACC money passed through the housing authority, which isn't federal money when it gets to the tax credit, and the rents collected from the tenants in the tax credit properties. Your major concern with the tax credit is that you don't admit tenants that don't meet the area median income, because then the credits could be in jeopardy and you'd have to pay that back to the investors. But I believe you hire an outside consultant that reviews those files to ensure that none of that that happens, right?
Yes.
I believe that, yes.
Thank you, Mike.
Plus the CR comes in.
Right.
We have several audits throughout the
And you do
year.
your file testing of those files for when you're here for the component unit audit.
Correct.
Well,
Sure.
Right. We review those files for the income qualifications on those files, the 50058 forms.
Yes. And a lot of these, if I could just add, a lot of these, all of the component units are also audited by HCR, the investors. So we have several audits throughout the year on these properties and inspections.
One of the things you mentioned was we're referred to as a low-risk housing party. Does that mean we're above most other authorities? And
I will let Mike explain it in the world of audit.
So if you're either a high risk or a low risk. You were going to be a high risk if there are findings in the audit report. If there are findings, that means that there were probably 2 or 3 deviations out of our sample size. We select 40 tenant files. We usually select about 50% of the capital funds expended. And if we found discrepancies in about 3 or more of the files, it would elevate it to a finding. And that would cause you to be a high risk authority. Now, what happens when you're a high risk authority is, instead of us having to look at 20% of the federal awards expended, we have to look at 40%. So that might entail us looking at more programs if we can't cover it in just the voucher or the programs we were expected to look at. The penalty to the housing authority for that, aside from having the finding, is that the audit fee usually increases, because then there's more work to do. We have to pick another program and we have to go through all the compliance requirements for that. aside from being more work, it's more of a headache for the staff because they have to do more work to pull those files, and there's more compliance to be done. So if you were to have a finding on compliance, that would do it. If you would have a finding on your financial statement audit, for example, if I'm just going to throw something out there that I know is a material number. If for some reason you decided, oh, we don't agree with it, we're not going to book the OPEB liabilities. Well, we would give you a qualified opinion on the financial statements because that number is material to it, and that would also cause you to be a high-risk auditee. But that didn't happen. What's that?
We get a reduction in your fee because we get a reduction in your fee because of your low risk.
The fee anticipates you being a low risk because you have been.
Good try that.
I was about to say, as your lawyer, don't answer that question.
Very good. I like it. Good job.
Thank you.
Accounting. What's your name again?
Yeah, Brandon.
Brandon. Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys are keeping us above board.
Doing our best. She's the gatekeeper.
Got it, Mike, or are you good?
I'm good unless anybody has any questions. I think I touched on all the important things in the report.
I only have one sort of general question, Mike, relative to, your portfolio that you guys review, which I think is pretty substantial for housing authorities. Are you seeing any material negative changes as a result of federal funding changes throughout your portfolio? Not specific to us, but
we've seen. I've had a couple of authorities where their funding was cut, where they've had to reallocate a lot of costs, either between their tax credit properties or their not-for-profits because the funding was lowered, right? As you know, during COVID, the inflation factor was increased more than it normally was on both the utilities and the PEL levels, right? That's the way you're funded. And so now that they've come down to more normal levels, that the funding has dropped off a little bit, compounded by the fact that many housing authorities, including Albany, suffers from increased tenant receivables because during COVID, many people decided that they didn't need to pay their rent, or it went around, oh, you don't have to pay your rent and nothing's going to happen to you. Now, ERAP has helped in that respect because you have recouped some of that money. But there are housing authorities that have not, that are still struggling with these high receivables. And, I always tell them it's imperative to explain to the tenants that, the rent helps you provide the services that they need, such as security, repairs to the buildings, maintenance, beautification projects with flowers in the way, you need to maintain the property. And especially when you have all these Inspire inspections now going around and you have to get the properties on a rotating basis ready for those reviews. So it does make it is challenging now for a lot of the authorities we deal with.
You just hit the biggest challenge that we have, and it's as much as anything else we've seen in the past 6 months, that really take a different tone with our tenants who don't fully understand, nor members of the community and the political entities who don't fully understand what the repercussions of not paying rent during that period of time were.
I find that's the most challenging part for authorities. It's the most challenging part because in a lot of cases, you're dealing with people, right? They're already in public housing. They're already, they're struggling. They're making the income qualifications, and it's kind of hard to be tough on those people. But at the same time, you have to say, if you don't pay the rent, we can't provide the services, because the subsidies don't, they take into account that we're going to collect rent. That's the way the formula is driven.
Yep.
So if you're unable to collect the rent, it makes everything much harder on the authority to find ways to balance all these expenses. And as you know, one of your biggest costs that just went up was insurance. Right, your insurance bills on your properties just went through the roof in a lot of neighborhoods, especially up in Albany.
It certainly did.
Yeah.
Mike, as always, thank you very much. Any further questions for Mike?
And speaking of insurance, is that a national trend?
Yeah.
Insurance?
Yeah, it's been affecting many of the housing authorities I deal with, at least in this tri-state area.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Have a great rest of your summer.
All right. You too. Bye.
Until next year. Good job, Chiquita and Brendan.
Thank you.
It's really awesome to hear. And every year I've been on the board, that's all I've gotten from you guys, and so really good stuff. Thank you. No risk. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, we will move to our resolutions.
You're welcome to stick around. Just letting her know she was welcome to hang out with us. So, okay, wonderful.
This is the fun part.
Yes.
Item number 07-25-20, resolution approving a contract with DLC Electric LLC for fire pump switch gear and generator replacement, as well as related electrical upgrades at Fountain Park Homes. Chiquita?
Thank you.
Fairly self-explanatory.
I was just going to say that.
Does anyone have any questions, comments, or concerns?
Is
Can
it outdated, or are you just looking at doing it?
Oh, it's definitely needed, with Townsend, it's outdated,
Questions,
reached
comments?
its age.
Yeah.
Motion to approve?
I'll make that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 07-25-21, resolution approving a contract with Beam Enterprises Inc. for asbestos abatement at Lincoln Square Homes.
Okay.
As a side note, if anyone knows someone who wants to buy those.
My question was gonna be, how much longer are we gonna hold on to that?
Oh, my God, it's not a matter of us holding on to it, trust me. It's really a matter of us finding that funding, and I continue that, hope that ultimately we will. But, in good graces and moving towards that, final demo or, dispo in this property, we were thankfully awarded the $3 million through the city who, through the grants, through, Senator, Schumer and Gillibrand, were graciously, we were selected, the city of Albany was selected, and Mayor Sheehan, provided us the funds to help towards either demoing or doing some of the abatement, which is what we have chosen to do, considering the cost, which is a little over $3 million. We went out to bid. As you can see, the bidders are listed there, and Beam was the chosen bidder. We will have to, as you see, put some of our capital funds dollars towards that. I will note that on the page after page 6, you'll see the alternative deduction, which basically, in order to fully abate the property, that would mean that they would have to remove the windows. However, then that would create other issues with the property because you wouldn't have it protected. Even with plywood, there's only so much the solution that they dip it in can withstand the weather that we deal with. So we decided that that will have to remain there in the windows, at least internally, they'll gut out the, you know, the asbestos.
It's an additional cost.
Yes,
Ideally, if we had a buyer lined up or somebody who's, you know, whatever, another $5 million to take the place down,
yeah,
to be able to combine the two of these things and save
a lot of money,
a lot of money.
yeah,
There's still hope that that may
yeah,
happen, with some of the $400 million that the state has offered to the city of Albany.
yeah,
But we'll wait and see. In the meantime, you gotta get rid of the asbestos anyway.
yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
even when they demo it, that's
Yes.
part of the cost of demo.
You would have to do it anyway, yeah. So what they're doing now, they would have to do it before they can, you know, knock it down anyway.
You could,
Good decision.
based on the size of the structure, there's no way to wrap it,
Yeah,
paint it,
right.
you take it down.
I'm not an expert on asbestos or anything like that, but how would be the air quality affected, especially people in that area, in that community?
There's,
Will it affect people, and when will
It's
it?
it's contained within the building,
yeah,
but it still has to be removed. So think in terms of like an old pipe, right? They wrap it in asbestos to keep the heat from, you know. So that asbestos is contained.
it's not airborne. They take measures to,
It,
yeah,
like, the reason the cost is so significant is
Right.
because it takes a lot of time to wet it down and to pull it.
There's also
And the-
constant air monitoring. When
Yeah.
any of this type of work is being done, they have to hire an independent firm to monitor the air throughout the entire project.
Yeah.
So if it were to hit a number that was not appropriate, they would have to shut the building, they would have to shut the project down.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of built-in safeguards.
This happened when we knocked down Fort Lincoln. I don't know if you remember, but that was our main office. It had asbestos, and they had to do the abatement prior to the demoing the building. So it's the same process.
And asbestos generally is not a problem,
If
unless
you don't
it's
touch it,
disturbed.
it's,
Right.
It's only when
It's only when
that
it's
it becomes a
disturbed.
problem.
Yep.
if I die young, it'll be because of asbestos and the fact that I removed asbestos from several houses.
Uh-oh. Is it contagious?
No.
Sure.
No.
The suit that he had on
Had it in it.
had it in.
Oh, okay. Is that the
Any
one
other-
you used when you removed it? Yes, indeed.
Any other questions, comments?
No, sir.
No.
Motion to approve?
Yes,
Make
indeed.
that motion.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Item number 07-25, resolution approving a contract with Brown Design and Construction for deck replacement at 107 Broad Street, 112 through 116 Clinton Street, 21 Third Ave, and 62 Morton Ave.
Also known as Jared Holt for the most part, and some, I don't know if you've heard of us call some of the property Jared Holt. However, pretty self-explanatory, end of life and, in need of repair. It's currently wood. I believe the materials will now be, and of course, the name, the, material is going to, is it track? Which has a, which will have a longer, lifespan.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Motion to approve? All in favor?
Second.
And aye.
All right. You got your second in. Thank you, sir. Item number 07-25-23, resolution authorizing the Housing Authority to seek rental assistance demonstration in section 18 blend approval for Steamboat Square renovation phase 2.
Thank you, Chairman. Phase 2, HUD has come out with, I guess, a new ruling or, preference, whereas they are looking to ensure that in a housing authority's annual plan, that the term, section 18, is included in the plans for, you know, revitalization, under the, rental assistance demonstration and revitalization projects in the future. So it was asked of us to go back and update our language. Even though we had RAD, it did not specifically mention the blend. So we have to go back and update our annual plan in preparation for our closing in October. So we're going to be updating that information, and Brian has something he wants to point out.
I think that's the next.
Am I speaking ahead of? Okay.
Yeah, that one.
Okay, so I'm combining it. Okay, I apologize. All right, so I was ahead. This one is to allow us to seek RAD and Section 18 for Steamboat Phase 2. I apologize, I jumped ahead. The next one, I don't have to repeat myself.
We've passed this similar resolution many, many times over the years.
Yes.
This one in particular for Steamboat Phase 2, Steamboat Square Phase 2.
Questions?
Do you have to go back and adjust all of them? I see some dates in here, July 15, 2020. Do you have to go back and adjust all of those documents? Is that
No,
part of it?
no.
Just
So scratch what I said because I jumped ahead of the next resolution. This one is just to allow us to do the revitalization of Phase 2 under the RAD and Section 18 blend.
Okay.
Yes.
And some of those dates, Pastor, are
Yes.
we've been working on this since those dates.
Yes.
So those are documents that were prepared 5 years ago and slowly moving up to this point.
Yes.
That's why there's some old dates in there.
Oh, okay. You don't look a day older, man.
Luckily, smarter people than I have been working on it.
Oh, very good.
I will make a
Motion to approve?
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
May I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Hey,
Okay.
Item number 07-25, resolution authorizing the amendment of the CHA annual plan and 5-year plan and authorizing the update of applicable administrative policies. And as this has already been explained, I will ask for a motion.
2 for 1.
I know, I jumped the gun, my apologies. Oh, goodness.
Way to shorten the meeting.
Item number 07-25, resolution authorizing the transition of emergency housing voucher families to the Housing Choice Voucher Program and further authorizing the updating of applicable administrative policies.
Thank you. I'll try to make it, I'll summarize it. Basically, what it's in June 20th, HUD pushed out a notice that basically ended the emergency housing voucher. You may have seen some news clippings, particularly in our industry, like CLAFA and FADA, about that particular funding source coming to an end that supports the families who currently have those types of vouchers. The notice that HUD has put out basically said that we have to transfer those families over into our regular Housing Choice Voucher Program, but in order to do that, you have to create a preference that allows them to be able to be transferred over to that. Caveat behind that is that we have been advised that obviously we cannot issue vouchers. So we have to take a look at our funding source and get approval and a waiver that will allow us to put these families on so that they don't lose their subsidy. So this action is very critical to the needs of the families that are currently on this program.
Okay. Is the process complicated, whereas the people that's affected are not going to understand exactly what's going on?
We will have to notify them, explain the situation. Hopefully there will be no interruption. That's the goal. This is why we're taking this step now, to make sure that, they should not see the effects of the change. It's basically a Section 8 program, but the type of voucher they were issued had its own funding source, which has come to an end.
Okay. They got a choice to remain or leave?
No, there is no choice to remain. If you
So they
cannot
have to go.
stay on the program, correct.
Okay.
We have to transfer them.
the housing authority. They have a choice to remain under that, or they can go and get their own apartment someplace else. You know what I mean? They don't have.
So with the voucher, it's not so much about the apartment, it's the subsidy that pays for it. So they can choose to stay there and not, take our voucher, which in case we would help them with the rent. Otherwise, they would have to pay the full rent. So that's the option. It's not a matter of moving.
Mhm.
It's more or less, do you want our voucher so that we can continue to pay a portion of your rent? I hope I'm answering your
Yeah,
question.
I'm not making myself clear.
Okay.
Now that they have this choice, they want to move to Cohoes. They want to go to a whole different.
It's not a
place.
choice.
So no matter what, they have to stay there.
If they're under a current lease, they can, so I see what you're saying. You're saying, because this program ends,
Right.
can they now end their lease? There's still a lease obligation to the landlord that they have to comply with. We don't get involved with the tenant-landlord situation, which is the lease. We only get involved with the regulatory program that we administer that pays the portion of the rent. So on our end, we have to transfer them per HUD guidance. Whether or not they want to stay and move, that's going to be up to them, and whether or not they can get out of their current lease.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because
It is.
they could, and it's
Legally, right?
say that may be cause for breaking a lease.
It's still, all it's doing, so maybe I can
Right.
explain it.
I mean,
If you allow me to explain it, it's not the way that you're thinking. So if they're on the Section 8 program,
yes.
EHV, that's just the name of the type of program, no different than if you heard Mike say Shelter Plus Care, although it's administered differently, but it's a different type of program. All we're saying is you are now going to be you're going to be, as opposed to an HEV documents on your paperwork or language on your paperwork, it is now Housing Choice Voucher, our regular Section 8 program. It is calculated the same, it's administered the same, it's just a different name for the program. So there will not be any interruption to anyone participating under EHV. So it doesn't necessarily end and say this is your out. It's just transferring the funding source and how we pay the rent.
Okay.
The program that's paying the rent is changing from one program to a different program. Everything else in 99% of the.
It's all the
situations is gonna
same.
be exactly the same.
It's just, except for the name.
Yeah.
But we still have to notify them that this changed. They need to know what type of program, because they were brought under a different,
Notice any difference, am I correct?
basically, yes. But we have to tell them,
Of course.
yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Paperwork will be remarkably similar, everything will be the same. Most people, like you said, will not realize
It.
the fact that it's any different.
Okay. Good.
Further questions, comments, concerns? Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Keeping it on that side, makes me feel like I'm sort of saying aye, Motion made, second, go.
That concludes our action items. Seeing there's no advisement, do you have any programmatic updates?
Well,
Go ahead.
all the programs stuff is in the book, but, just to look over a few things, yesterday, the summer meal kicked off, right? Summer meal
Yes.
kicked off, that's one of the highlights.
How was the turnout?
Turnout was very good. What ended up happening was when the first kickoff started, we had about 2 kids because the families were in line to get into the pool. And so after they got into the pool, they later came down and all the food was distributed and kids ate. So we did some arts and crafts with the kids that did show up at the beginning. And then, I'm sure we had some activities afterwards. I was there at the beginning and I wasn't there after they started showing up once they got into the pool. It's beautiful. I was there for the ribbon cutting. It's absolutely beautiful. I even put my feet in the water. It was good.
Sharks. But yeah, I mean, again, the resource center continues to do a lot of different stuff. They also gave out, their monthly distribution last week. And I think it was like, I know it's on the trucks with a whole bunch of bags.
Yeah, it was a lot.
It was a lot of bags.
They continue.
So they continue to do that. The National Grid grant is still, we're still working with National Grid, Fidelis, and they're doing every Wednesday a weekly ice cream social
Yep.
that I just found out about, and they didn't invite us. But, cool.
They didn't invite you?
Yeah. But it's okay, I'm on a diet anyway.
Well, Sarah vote yes.
But yeah, I mean, they're doing a lot of different things. I think that's pretty much what all the stuff you can read up on in the book. The one thing we're having, well, when the discussion's over with, is National Night Out. Apparently they're having one major National Night Out in Washington Park. But I don't like it, so I'm trying to do my own.
Where in?
They're gonna do one, I think, APD is doing the one Washington Park. So.
Yeah, I'm just curious where in Washington Park you'd be able to do that.
Because they're under construction,
Yeah, and,
playground.
yeah,
I don't know.
it's not really conducive to,
Yeah, I don't know.
having
Would it be near where you
stuff like that,
do the Unite the City, maybe?
It could be, but, that's part of where they're putting a new,
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
area.
Well, I saw that they're doing a skateboarding camp, so maybe it's in that area. I don't know.
That's the tennis courts and the.
Yeah, I don't know.
Plays happening too, so I don't know. I don't know when what they're planning.
Do you know what date it
It's the
is?
fifth.
Okay.
It's still the first Tuesday, because it's a national thing that happens. But, for me, the whole concept of that is neighborhood, relationships, with, police officers. And especially with the heightened of all the violence that's been happening. More and more so important. But we'll see what, we're gonna look into it.
I'm sure you will. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Not programs. I have some other information.
Some other things you'd like to update?
Yes.
Feel free to.
Okay, it's my turn. All right, I just wanted to give the board a heads up, and I think this is just appropriate at this time. Apparently, another group of representatives, some residents, some non-residents, decided to visit the Common Council again last night regarding Ida and concerns. And I wanted to, and we were contacted by the media inquiring about some of the things that were stated. One of the things I want to point out that is very important, that we have met with the residents at Ida. You've seen them come here. We've had meetings after our board meeting in May when it was in May. We met with the United Tenants representative and some of the residents downstairs. A lot of our executive staff, leadership met with them, gave them contact information. However, this individual decided to, again, go to the Common Council, providing misinformation, stating that they are unable to meet with us. We're refusing to meet with them when no one has contacted my office, did not contact the site manager's office or our general counsel, which in the past have been contacted by said individuals. In addition to one of our common councils, they have members one of our, board members have also been contacted in the past, and is my understanding, they did not reach out to that individual as well. All of that is, being said, the sightings or issues that the residents brought up, were things in which we looked at, based on what they said, and not one of them called in a work order to advise us that there were some issues in their apartment, which we reiterated during the meetings that we've had, and we continue to reiterate. In fact, our maintenance staff wear T-shirts with the call-in work order number on every single day, but they still choose not to call in these work orders so that we can serve them in the manner in which we, strive to do on a day-to-day basis. This individual who works for UTA, is continuously in her aggressive manner, providing misinformation and guidance to, a selected few of our residents. One of the biggest issues they mentioned was the patio, and I'm saying this to go on record. We closed the patio, and we shut off that door because residents were leaving the door open, and when they ran to the store, other people from the community were getting in. Some of those residents were letting people in. It became more of a problem than a necessity. We did it out of concern and safety for our residents, that we decided that we were going to close that door, and the entrance will remain where, the main entrance. So those actions were taken out of, long time consideration, and we decided that that was the best thing to do after consulting with, safety representation, our director of security, and that was the best solution on that end, to try to do our part to make sure that our families and individuals are safe. But one thing I want to point out, we can't fix units and we can't fix the problem if we don't know the problem. But, so that's what occurred. And then there was another representative who spoke up who was not a resident, and actually there were 3 who were not a resident, and one who was upset with the outcome of but us following the rules and regulations, but they were not very, accepting of that. So I guess they decided to speak up as well. So I just wanted to give you a heads up because I don't know what the story is going to read, but we did respond, and I'm not sure what the outcome will be. But it's ongoing, and it's just really disruptive, and it's taking us away from our, primary mission.
So these things happen. And it's unfortunate. And I think we've all been here for however many years, and periodically these things do pop up. This one has a little more teeth because there was a political component to it, but at the end of the day, if you follow procedure, you do what you're supposed to do, we're doing the right thing. Unfortunately, we don't have this public relations machine that we can, counter some of the stupidity with. We just don't have the resources to do that, so we got to take these hits periodically. I'm not too concerned about it, Chiquita. You've documented your attention to this particular individual. We know that not only has this particular individual been a problem, they've been a problem for a long time. They have also been a resident for a long time who is very familiar with policies and procedures and how to address concerns. And doing so in the media is not going to change the outcome, because the outcome is written by policy and procedure that we don't even make.
So is there any concern of safety with your staff? Is there any?
I think that that's always a concern. My staff, whether verbally or, in person, deal with a lot of disgruntled residents. They have been attacked in the past. And, you know, that is a major concern. We do what we can when these things happen. We pursue lease violations and we bring them to court. We do follow the rules and regulations. Everyone's entitled to due process, and unfortunately, in some cases, judges have allowed them to continue to stay with us. In some cases, they've allowed them to stay for a certain period of time. Whereas I understand why, you know, sometimes they get upset because they don't feel as if they're protected or that we have their best interest. But
would you say overall, morale is good, bad, or somewhere?
I think morale is good, but you have to understand in the sense of depending on the department, you know, because if you constantly have to deal with, you know, challenges every single day, it breaks you down. You know, when you're trying to do your job, it breaks you down. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's directed towards management, but it gets frustrating. And when you try to take action on behalf of your employee, I too get frustrated when things don't happen. Or they're not, I don't want to use the term punish, but we have to keep them on our property. You know, I take the action necessary to ensure the safety of our residents and our employees. That's my responsibility.
Let's see what the story looks like, but depending on how it plays out, this may be an opportunity to do an op-ed or something along those lines for the Times Union, or, you know, an opportunity for you to, you know, set, if you will, set the record straight, and perhaps something like that would end it.
I doubt it because, and I agree with what you're suggesting, but the media doesn't seem to want to. We do set the record straight every time they reach out to us,
Yeah,
but they still don't.
There's a strategy involved in this, and it's not just commenting immediately on the story, because if you have this and you have that, they're just going to write. I'm talking about sort of an overall, not specific to this issue, although a component of an op-ed could be specific to this issue. Sort of grander things that we were talking about, you know, when Mike was speaking about how the true nature of our work, what we're really seeking to do, all the positives, and when these things happen, they detract from our ability to provide those positives, beautification being one, because that's the first thing cut when you don't have the money to do it. And if we're spending more money on insurance because somebody's making a claim and our insurance carrier sees that claim,
Yep.
it has a direct effect on our bottom line.
Yes.
Even if that claim is unsubstantiated, and which in this case it is. So I think there's an opportunity here for you to consider, and it's not necessarily a board item, for you to consider somehow, you know, addressing this strategically in the media that lays out how these things negatively affect our ability to provide the good things.
I like where you're going. I would add, because we've done this before, we hire public affairs firms who do this for a living. So
And we had Baker on, didn't we have, we had somebody on.
There were 2 years ago, not under me, but yes, there were 2.
where they can come in and really craft something, and then make sure your counsel, you know, he's around, look at it. And I agree. I think a nice little op-ed would be good, you know, because eventually, you know, these things get late, you know, if we just ignore it. So,
I don't think we're ignoring it. It's just, like you said, we just don't have that outlet to.
Right.
So is it a constant, they're constant naggers? Constant naggers?
Pretty much, it's the same
Been in the
people,
building for over 10 years?
pretty much. And some of them have been part of the problem
Okay, so I'm gonna say this.
and continue to be part of the problem.
I know we talked about the nature of 45 Central, people hanging out. It's the behavior of the community.
Yeah,
It's the behavior. Whether we have to take the money to pay for beautification or taxes, people are not gonna put that in their mind. They don't care about whether your taxes get paid or beautification. They want a place to live. And it's the nature of the community. I think that has to be changed throughout the city of Albany. It's having them to respect where they live and understand the importance. You know, there's three things I say about school. I work in the school district. There's three things I told my former principals. There's three things that people want in school: free school, free meal, free after-school program. Anything else in between doesn't matter, as long as they have that place. And I think we've done everything possible to let them know that we are fixing up, we're making sure, and you're gonna have those constant naggers. He or she, whoever it is gonna constantly nag about, oh, the building's this and safety's that, and, you know, but you got to try, maybe the manager got to say, listen, you want to care about your live, you need to make sure you don't have squanders coming in, you got to make sure that, listen, we're trying to keep it clean, what are you doing? Sometimes you've got to be real clear with some people.
yeah.
What are you doing to make sure?
And we have, yeah.
I mean, sometimes you've got to really go around a different way of
Right.
saying.
And if you notice in some of the buildings, to your point, you know, we had signs made. You see something, say something. This is your building. This is your home. You have to, you know, take care of it as well. So, and there's signs throughout the building. I've sent personal letters directly from me saying, you know, these behaviors will not be tolerated and you will be held accountable. The problem when you say those words and then they go to court and nothing happens to them pretty much, then it doesn't matter. You know, it means nothing. The weight and the power that you had is gone because you take them to court and then the decision comes out, well, you know, give them another year or, you know, let them stay or put them on probation. Let's do this. When in fact, in some cases, we've had long time problems with some of these, you know, residents. But the fact that it didn't happen over a year or 2 years and it happened again, but the fact is, this is not the first time that we've had to deal with the behavior, and then they're able to get away with it for the most part.
For this individual. Anyway.
Could we make a motion to end the meeting?
Yes.
I got one.
Stay on the record or what? Okay. I will ask then, Lively, can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes.
Can I get a second? Table.
Third, fourth, sixth.
All in favor?
Aye. I'm here.
Adjourned.